Okay, so we've got our equipment on. It's time to grab a rope and get the rope ready to start climbing, and then we're going to tie in. As the second, the sorting the rope out is your job. The leader's going to be getting ready to start doing the climb, so they might be reading the guidebook, having a drink, putting their rack on, or tying their shoes up, any of these things. So we're going to do this whilst they're doing all of those other bits and bobs, so that we're kind of ready at the same time and we don't end up with lots of dead time sitting around. So what I need to do is find an end. So I've got an end here. I'm gonna undo this knot, which is keeping it all nice and neat. And then I'm going to be quite careful, and I'm not just going to throw this on the floor. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it out nice and gently like that in an organized stack. And I'm going to start from that end that I just got. I'm going to pop that out of the way. And I'm going to make a nice little neat pile at the bottom of the climb that we're going to start climbing. Keep going on this. When you're doing this, you want to use nice little small bits. You don't want to be going like this because it's tiring and you end up with a really not very neat pile. Okay, so I'm at the end. I don't know if you saw, but didn't really have any tangles there because I was nice and neat in how I prepared the rope to get started. When you've got a rope stacked like this, it's always just worth getting into the habit of thinking about which end is the top and which end is the bottom. So the end that I started with, I've stacked the rope on top of it, so that's become the bottom, and then this end that I'm left with is the top. And this is a really important skill to keep in mind as you go through learning to lead climb, especially when you come onto things like transitioning to making an abseil or things like that, because it just means that you're not having to flip the rope from one side to the other all the time and you're not getting as many tangles. So this being the top is going to be the leader's rope, so I'm going to pop this behind me out there. They know that that's their end, my end's down here, so next thing we're going to look at is how to tie into that. I've got my bottom of the rope here. I'm going to show you how we're tying into this so that we can be part of the rope system that's going to move up the cliff. Okay, first things first, I want to pinch a bit of rope in my hand, and I'm going to let the bottom go to the floor, and you want it to be from about your belly button to the floor, is about the right amount. I'm then going to pinch that. I'm going to go around it, and I'm going to go through the hole. And then what you should end up with is a little number 8 knot like that. From there, I'm going to go down through the top loop of our harness. So where the belay loop is, we've got a top loop here that's on our waist loop, and then we've got a bottom loop here which connects our leg loop. So down through the waist loop, down through the bottom loop, and then now we're going to retrace this figure of 8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scooch that out of the way, go on the outside, and now I'm just tracing around following the pattern. Go around the back of that one, down through the hole. And when I'm doing this, I'm being careful that this bit that I've just put through is sitting behind, going round underneath again, and then I'm coming underneath out through the same hole. And at this point it looks kind of neat, but we've got little gaps in it and it's not very tight. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around the different bits, different strands, pull them tight, so we get a nice dressed figure of 8 like that. It's nice and neat. And then I'm going to finish it off with a stopper knot. Stopper knot, I always hold the figure of 8, pop my thumb there, go over the top, make a cross, come underneath again, and then I go back through where my thumb is. So I slide my thumb out, go through, and I want this figure of 8 knot to be nice and snug. I want this stopper knot to be nice and snug up to our figure of 8. So I'm going to put my hand over the top of it, hold the strand that's coming out, just hold it in place as I tighten it. And then you should end up with no gap between the two. We don't want a gap because you don't want to accidentally clip into that loop there because it's not strong. One thing you might ask is, do we need a stopper knot on a figure of 8? And the answer is no, we don't need a stopper knot on a figure of 8. But a stopper knot has a few advantages to using it, especially when you're starting climbing. one thing it indicates that we have enough tail coming out through the figure of 8, so I'll explain what I mean by that. What I mean by that is if we only had, the rope only came to here, and we were climbing on it, it could start creeping back through, and we'd suddenly end up with a figure of 8 knot that wasn't completely done up. So that's one reason we have it. It indicates that we have enough spare rope. You only need, I think most manufacturers say 10 to 15 centimeters of spare rope coming out, so it's actually not very much. So if you've kind of got this much, that's going to be enough. The stopper knot's quite nice because it does tidy this out of the way, and it does have one other advantage. If it's tied properly, so a proper barrel knot, if we haven't rethreaded our figure of 8 and we put a barrel knot on, it will actually close on itself. So I'll show what I mean by that as well. Okay, so I've got my half of my figure of 8. Imagine I wasn't paying very much attention, thread through my harness, get distracted for a second, my leader says something to me and I'm not paying attention, and I come back to it and just tie a stopper knot. And now I'm distracted again, I haven't checked it properly. But the thing that will happen is if I do fall off with this, it'll act as a bit of a snip knot and it will actually lock on itself. So definitely not ideal. If we did clip to the middle of this loop, it probably would pull itself apart, but it's better than nothing. The stopper knots, if you're going to tie one, tie it properly or don't tie it. Okay, now I've got my nice adjusted figure of 8 again. I'm going to tie a stopper notch one more time. And that's me. I've done my bit. At this point, your leader's going to tie into their rope as well. And then before we leave the ground, we're going to need to put them on belay, but we'll cover that in another video. The really important thing that we do need to do though is we need to do a buddy check with the other person that we're climbing with. So we're going to look at the figure of 8 knot, make sure that it's safe and that it's tied correctly. So we're just going to check that our figure of 8 knot is actually a figure of 8 knot. So does it look like a figure of 8? Yes, it does. Is it tied to the strong parts of our harness? So yes, I can see that clearly. And same for the other person. And you also check that you're on belay properly as well. Cool. I think that's covered everything for sort of the very beginnings of getting started about what equipment to buy, how to wear it, and how to get set up on your rope system ready to start climbing. Got any questions, pop them below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.